Okay, I think we're going to start, folks. Ann will join us when she gets here, hopefully. Jason is doing the conference call with all the municipal officials this morning at 8:30. He'll be joining us after that. Let's call to order. Are there any changes this morning to the agenda? We do have a revised Resolution A that was sent out yesterday by Katrina. That's out of the Highway Department. So we'll be talking about the revised version when we get there. Is there any public comment this morning? Don't see anybody on the screen. We didn't have anything. Chair's report is simply that the other night at legislature, I did bring up with the chair that we would like to schedule some time to have Jeff Smith talk to us. We're going to talk a little bit about that this morning, about our highway and bridge program and where we are, especially with the reductions that we're having to look at because of our financial situation caused by the COVID pause and the plunge into recession, I guess we would say. I don't have anything else. We'll come back to the county administrator's report. Let's go to Barbara Ekstrom, the Department of Recycling and Materials Management. Morning, Barbara.
Good morning. I wanted to just give you some quick introductions because we have a very quick presentation about recycling collection. You all know Leo Riley. He's our deputy director, and he also oversees operations. Seth Dennis is going to be the one who gives the presentation this morning.
Morning.
Seth is a waste reduction and recycling specialist. He oversees the recycling collection program. Jeremy's our communications coordinator, and something might come out of this that enhances our educational opportunities. So Jeremy's going to listen, and he might add something. But let me just say this real quick, and then we'll turn this over to Seth. The reason that we decided to do a study about contamination in the residential recycling stream was because of the problems US and in our county about material that can't be recycled and how that was impacting and reducing our prices. So to do something about it, we had heard that in the nation, 25% of material that winds up going in the bins or the totes typically is contaminated. We knew that wasn't the case here. So we did two things. We selected some routes over a period of time. After we moved from the please and the reminder stickers, we went into a warning phase, identified what the significance of problems was. And it turns out that we started out with about 40,000 households, only about 400 a week. 400 a week. Is that right? Yeah, 800. No. It was 800 a week that were contaminated. 800 every 2 weeks. Sorry. And we've cut that in half. Now that's very little compared to 40,000 homes, but we're looking at how we can do better. We also did a study at our facility, an audit to identify what's going on at the facility by those coming in, and looked at routes as well. And it was good news. It looked like we're only at 5% contamination. And again, our goal though is we spent many years giving out please stickers. We spent 6 months here giving out warning stickers, and probably going to do that for 3 more months. And then we're going to move into a rejection phase. So I'm going to turn this over to Seth, and he'll describe to you exactly what we did and where we're going to go from here.
Before Seth starts, I just want to mention that Ann Corman has now joined us. And it's interesting about your this whole issue of contamination. I just read an article in another nearby jurisdiction was having whole loads of their recycling rejected because of household trash contamination.
Thank you, Mike, and it is a huge problem, but we are in we're in good shape, but we're gonna become in excellent shape when all is said and done.
Seth, why don't you go ahead? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take this
Yeah,
off?
you
All
can
right,
have
I'm
to.
gonna remove the mask so I can talk. Thanks for having me, everyone. So just to kind of walk through the recycling audit, which we did early in 2020. Our goal was to try to figure out what our contamination rate was in Tompkins County. We have other ideas of what's going on in the country, and but we wanted to understand where we were. So what we did is we first selected 5 routes, and we worked with Casella on this because they have the drivers that are out collecting the material. And we also worked with the recycling and solid waste facility. So once we figured out, we picked 5 routes, and each of those routes kind of represent different areas in Tompkins County. So, for example, we had an apartment, what we called an apartment route, which these are multifamily homes with 4 or more units. We had what we called a city residential. So this was more, heavy residential inside the city of Ithaca. We had a city business route, which are, could have been residents or apartments in like a business area. And then we selected a town route and a village route. So we kind of thought that was a kind of a good group of where we could get different samples of recycling from each of those routes. We started the audit collection in January 13th. We plan to run it for 8 weeks and get 4 samples from each of those routes. We did have one little hang up as far as we had a snowstorm, so we kind of had to reschedule that collection day for an additional, pushed it 2 weeks at the end of the audit. But we did get all the information that we wanted. The steps as far as once this material was collected, the Casella drivers would come into our facility and let the scale house operator know that this was an audit load. So they would call back to the recycling and solid waste center and let them know that an audit load was coming in. The truck would drive around, unload that material, and then a scoop or a sample was taken from this material of each of these routes and put into a container. That container then was weighed on a scale, and the material was sorted on a sorting line by human people that sorted that material out of all the contamination. So that material, all the contamination was pulled from the line and then collected, and it went back into the original sample container and weighed, and then we came up with the percentage of contamination. So after this was all said and done, we took the average percent of contamination from each of these 5 routes: the apartment route, the city residential route, city business route, and the town route and the village route. So once we had those, what we kind of did is broke it down by, all right, which one of these routes was had the least contamination and which ones were the most contaminated. And for an example, the town route had the least amount of contamination at 5.03%, and the most was the city business route at 5.79%. And if we broke that down even further, taking the average of all those percentages, we came to the realization that Tompkins County's contamination rate is 5.37%, which is a lot better than what we thought. And it was, kind of a good exercise for us to do as far as moving forward with it. I know we're going to continue to identify contamination on the streets. We're doing a lot of education, outreach. We're trying to identify what we call repeat contaminators. So these are folks that are identified by drivers on the streets that have continuous issues with contamination in their recycling. And we've already started to compile this information so we can reach out to these residents. I think that pretty much sums up how the audit went. I can welcome questions.
Well, why don't we see if Leo has a thought or two here, and then we can go from there.
I think the only thing I would add is that committee's well aware we have RFP out on the street. When it comes time for negotiating the new contract, this contamination rate is going to be a valuable number to have, considering it's low. It's low in the industry, and it's the contamination rate that, it's the high contamination rates that drive high processing fees and lowers commodity pricing. So it will be valuable as we start negotiations.
We will, from here, we're going to be doing this audit next year again, same time, see where we go, continuing, over time. We also are now assessing, okay, so we have, 400, I don't remember the exact numbers. We have very little, but we need to go further. Our goal is to get better and better at the curb. And again, Jeremy can mention some things that we've done about education, but we recognize that in order to, we were originally with COVID, we lost a few months because we needed to, everything else was a priority. But we are hoping to enforce and planning to enforce and rejecting bins where probably sometime in October, just to give people a little more time. And we are going to be directly getting the warning folks, and we are going to be reaching out to them through mailings, and there'll be extensive education before we move to enforcement. I would say the majority of municipalities and collectors have already been enforcing and leaving bins throughout the county, but we wanted to crawl, walk, and run with this. Education, do you want to make mention of any of the educational efforts you've done?
Yeah, we have a whole Recycle Right campaign that is trying to reach the whole county, but as we get this information about specific routes and locations that have high contamination rates, we can do things to target them a little more specifically, whether that's through outreach or advertising or targeted posts on social media. Also, like identifying problem materials through the audit that we can use to narrow our message. It's all useful, the information that we get in terms of doing that.
One thing that I think, Seth, you might want to mention is what materials were in the contamination.
Sure. Yep. So some of the common materials that we found that were pulled from the recycling audit, mostly trash items, non-recyclable plastics, batteries, things like styrofoam, plastic bags, clear wrap, and garbage bag were some of the most common items.
Okay. Are there any questions for us? So now you know what we're doing. We're going to be, once you guys are comfortable, we are going to be coming up with a communication plan between now and when we do enforcement, and we will share in a very summary form with the media what we found and where we're going with this. so we can begin the process of, you know, giving our community congratulations. I mean, 2% contamination out on the streets, you know, and what we saw at the facility, you know, was 5%. So I mean, you're talking about people who are really doing a fantastic job for the most part, and we have some stragglers. So that is really the story here. Are there any questions?
Questions from the committee?
Ann has one. Ann.
Ann's hand is up. Go ahead.
Thank you for this presentation. So one question I had was, what's the incentive for the hauler to monitor the recycling materials?
Leo and Seth, yep.
So I guess probably one of the biggest incentives for the hauler is they know what they can and can't recycle and what they can and can't accept at the curb. So when they're going down a street and collecting these materials, they look inside of the bins because most of the time they're open containers that they can look in and identify it. So they know what they can take as far as, you know, what's going to be recycled, and I think that's pretty much.
Yeah, it just so happens that Casella being the hauler, the collector, and Casella being the operator of the Recycling Solid Waste Center, they see a 30% revenue share under the contract. So the more profitable Casella over here can be by handling cleaner material, they can process it faster, and they can get more money for the material. So it's in this case, it's a plus to have the same operator collecting the material as sorting the material.
Well, and I think also that, you know, this is a company that's performance driven. You know, when we were running into problems with miscollections, the VP, you know, set up a system, and there were benefits to the collectors, rewards, and, you know, they look at the performance. We still, you know, we used to have over 1,000 missed collections in a given month. Now we have about 30 on average. I think they're a performance-driven company, and that makes sense.
Yeah, but that's a good question, because really what's stopping a collector from getting it done as quickly as they can,
Yeah.
not looking at the material and just throwing it in the truck? That's a good question.
Yeah, thanks.
And then I'm confused a little bit about the numbers as far as you said 5.3% is the average contamination rate. Is that correct?
Yeah, that number is from all of the 5 routes that we selected.
Right. Actually, what I said was something different, actually. If you look at a given month and the total amount collected, that was what I was referring to.
Okay.
Go by Seth's number, yep.
So that's really benefiting us to have the education that you guys provide, the, you know, people in the community, I guess, just wanting to do it are I guess probably part of our culture, but also
Yeah.
but also then the hauler being the ultimate person doing the whole stream of that, so to speak.
Yeah, they want to do the right thing. It's very clear, and they like the partnership we have. They value the business, and I think we're, you know, it's all like it's a team. It's a complete team, and we've done continuous education even back, you know, many years ago, long before Jeff Dunn. I mean, we've always done education, and part of why it's been successful is the county collects all the homes through a contract. It's not each hauler doing their own garbage stops, and it's an integrated program. Jeremy has done wonders in bringing in social media tools into this, and I have a feeling we're going to do a really good job with, you know, the movement from the warning stickers to the you know, to the rejection stickers, and we will come back to you probably in September and let you know what we're doing here as we move toward enforcement, so that there are no surprises, because these are your constituents, and we want to make sure we run it by you, and that if you have any thoughts, carrying forward about that, that way it's not a surprise to anyone, and we're not dealing with 40,000 homes.
Thank you. Last question. Do we have a percentage before any of the reminders and enforcement started? Percentage of contamination?
I don't believe so.
This is our benchmarking
Right.
number.
Yep.
This will be our benchmarking number. We'll mirror the same audit again.
Well, we do actually, Leo. When we first started the warnings, we have, and the numbers in there, we had a certain amount that were getting warning stickers. And now, after a few months, we've cut that number in half. Do you remember what those numbers are off the top of your head?
Yeah, we started out like the first 2 weeks of giving out about 700 to 800 stickers every 2 weeks to residents. And now we're hovering right around the 400 number. So we're seeing that go down.
That's great.
And
Thank you
that's
very
out of-
much.
And that's out of, 20,000 homes a week.
Wow.
40,000. I mean, we should be really proud. One of the big decisions that was really important to me, and there are some of you here that have the same opinion, that were on the committee. We chose not to purchase and require totes, those big totes. And one of the reasons why I was really against it is because I felt like people would think of it as a garbage bin and try to hide stuff in there. Whereas when we have the bins out on the street, or even the little garbage cans, the hauler can look right into it and see what's there. And I think we saved a lot of money, and we helped our contamination percentage. We probably have one of the lowest percentages in the country, I have to be honest. I mean, we'll see.
Dave, did you have your hand up or not? Okay. I had a couple of questions. One was answered, and that was what the contamination consisted of. And you said that part of it is plastics that we don't take. We know that most plastics are now stamped with that triangle, or have been for a long time, that says recyclable, so that when the consumer looks at it, they think, well, this can be recycled. And I don't know if they're all educated enough as to the numbers as much as they should be. And we also know that just because it says it's recyclable doesn't mean there's a market for recycling it. And only some of that can be recycled. That not telling you folks anything. But I wondered if we need to increase our educational effort with respect to making people understand that those triangles are only a very small part of the story with recyclables.
That's a really good question, Mike, and I think that we have some really good answers for what we've been already doing. And maybe Jeremy and Seth, we have a brochure that just went out, and that brochure has changed, and it's available. The annual recycling brochure. There's a lot of really good information in there, and you've been doing a lot of social media, and we can always do more, Mike. I mean, I think it's a really good point.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we've been emphasizing the numbers 1, 2, and 5 in our all our education efforts so far. Yeah, I don't have much to add beyond that.
Anything, Seth?
No, I mean, we try to be really informative of what we know, the materials that can be recycled and can be made into new things, and trying to make sure that folks know what they can recycle in their curbside bin, and then what they can also bring down here as far as additional recyclables to the Recycling and Solid Waste Center.
I think, Mike, you have a good point. I think we can do more with that, and we'll brainstorm. And I also think that, the warning stickers don't just say warning. they actually include a list with check boxes as to what was in the bin that wasn't acceptable, okay? So it will say, isn't there a box for something about plastic in there? What does it say?
Non-recyclable plastics.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right. And we do get a lot of people calling. We have on our webpage, we have a contact us where you can write in a question and within 24 hours we answer. We do get a lot of people asking questions and we will encourage people to continue using those forums. As well, we also get a lot of emails, but we'll keep it going. We're gonna do the best we can. And we have delayed enforcement because with everything else, we felt we're not quite ready there. I wanna see that number, the 400 every week go down to 250, just so we can really make some progress.
Wondered also, is there a larger problem with contamination in areas that have a larger student population? Maybe apartments,
We would, prior to this audit, Mike, we would have assumed so.
yeah,
But surprisingly, if you look at those areas, I mean, they're all within a few percentage points of each other.
Tenth of a percentage
Tenth of a
Yeah.
percentage point. So, a lot of the apartment complexes house a lot of the college students. And they were the most surprising to me, was the large apartment complexes with the 96-gallon toters. I really expected them to be off the chart, and they weren't. That was the big surprise of the audit, at least to me.
Mhm.
So it's pretty consistent around the county with the different areas that we selected.
Although we're gonna learn more about that as we have Casella look at the warnings and the offenders and make contact with them. And I think there's varying degrees of offenders. I hate to think that most of those are repeat, but it's again taking our education process. And I think that with the addition of Jeremy in the last couple of years, he's really done a tremendous job in reaching out more and more. And I have to say, there are a couple of collectors from Casella that are dynamite. They're very, very, very caring and very clear in their communications with Seth.
Really, Mike, the only issue probably with college students is move out, because everything's done so quickly and volumes are so high.
We didn't have that.
We didn't have that this year.
had to go too quickly.
Yeah, right.
But maybe it's a good thing, and maybe it says that the education we've been doing for our young people going back 30 years is paying off. That it's a more of a natural thing for them than it would have been in the past.
But your point is well taken, and we have to continue that education and especially ramp it up. The enforcement is not the end all, the education is, and the continued education, making sure Jeremy is always cognizant. He puts out a lot of posts about the single-use plastics, the contaminations, and we'll collect those so we can share with you what we've been doing more specifically. So you might have some thoughts or ideas on what we could do better between now and the fall.
Well, this has been very informative. I want to really thank you for this report. I thought it was innovative, especially how you had actually determined through the actual sorting and weighing and things of the contamination, so that you could come up with a solid calculation here. I thought that was pretty impressive, and I want to thank all of you and your department for doing that.
Yeah, it was teamwork, wasn't it? There's a lot of teamwork involved. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll prepare a press release and share the results. It might be a couple weeks from now, only because we're working on our budget. But we'll let the public know. First of all, there's a lot of amazing work going on in the community toward preventing contamination. And we do have a little more work to do, and we'll let them know where we're going with this, okay?
Okay. Now on, if we can move along, on packet page 2, we've got your capital payment summary. Wondered if the committee had any questions on that.
That was what just,
We okay? All right. Anything else, Barbara?
Yes, one very quick thing. I want to remind you that we're moving along with the request for proposals, the final, for the vendors to submit proposals for the operation of the recycling center. It's going to be a 5-year contract with the option to renew for 5 years. We went through a draft, we got comments, we put together the final, and those proposals are due at the end of August. We have individual pre-proposal conferences with 2 vendors who requested them, and those are going to take place in July. And this contract will be analyzed and brought to the committee in November for consideration and award. And Mike, you do remember how we provided a summary. Jonathan's involved in this as well as our engineer. And, we've got a team of people. So that is going to be a really big thing. The bad thing is that we're having to budget for those operations for next year without having those numbers. But we have a really good sense from a survey that another staff just conducted about where things stand with the processing costs and the revenues and things of that. Well, we have a good sense on the processing costs, revenues not so much. So stay tuned for all that.
Is there any opportunity for other vendors, or you think the 2 are probably the ones we're going to have?
Well, yeah, no, BidNet allows for anyone, and all the vendors look at these things,
Yeah, I
but
understand that, but I just wondered.
typically we've only seen these 2 vendors who have facilities, the fancy single stream facilities in our neck of the woods.
Okay. Barbara, thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. Have a very good
And
rest of the
everyone
month.
there, Leo and Seth and all. Thank you.
Bye now.
I want to squeeze in here before we start with Jeff, Aaron Becker. Aaron Becker is our Weights and Managers Director. And I don't know whether this is your first F&I meeting or not, Aaron, but we're glad to have you here. And I didn't hear you.
Yes, it is my first F&I meeting, actually.
Well, welcome aboard, and we're pleased to have you. Is there anything you'd like to ask us, or you'd like to report to us anything? And you're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but I wanted you to be aware that we are glad that you're here and are happy to hear from you.
Well, I don't have anything for today's session, but I do have something in the works right now for next month's. It's basically a resolution that I just submitted. But basically just attending this session just to see how things work, get familiar with some names and faces, and that's pretty much what I'm doing right now.
Okay, good. Any of the committee have questions for Aaron?
Do we want to go around and introduce ourselves, or can he see our names?
Yeah, if you'd like to, go ahead, Ann.
Hi, Ann Corman, legislator for Town of Ulysses and the northern part of Enfield.
Dave?
Yeah, Dave McKenna, legislator for Newfield and the southern part of Enfield.
Good morning, Dave.
Morning.
Glenn Laurie, Groton, Dryden, Lansing.
Good morning, Glenn.
Dan?
And I know Mr. Hall, I know Mr. Lamaro, I know Ms. Holmes, and I know Mr. Smith.
Yeah, Dan Klein is here with us in chambers.
Hi, Aaron. I'm on the county legislature representing Danby and Caroline.
Hello, sir.
And Katrina's there.
Yeah, and I'm Mike Lane, and my district is the eastern part of Dryden.
Well, it was
Okay.
definitely a pleasure meeting all of you. And Katrina was definitely a huge help yesterday on the phone with the resolution we were working on. Thank you, Katrina.
Okay. All right, then let's move on to our highway department, Jeff Smith. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. How's everybody doing today? Getting some great weather. Summer's here.
So how do you want to do the resolutions first? You want to talk first? What would you like to do?
Yeah, the resolutions, I think, to make most sense of the three and then the one separate one, and then there's a discussion regarding our summer plans. We can do that last. But if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to put the resolutions A, B, and D all part of this conversation because they're all very closely related and they're related with the Ludlowville Bridge project.
Do you want to talk about that first and then have us do the resolutions?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to explain the relationship between the three. The first resolution, I always think it kind of makes most sense to approve a low bid when you know that the funding is approved, right? You want to approve the funding first. So that first resolution.
That's the one that has the revised version that was sent to everybody.
Correct. The only revision to that resolution was the selection of the reserve funds. Rather than using the HQ, we're using the D fund. That's the only change. The numbers, everything else is exactly the same. This is a resolution, and I'll get into the exact dollar figures, and you can vote on all of them together when you know the whole story. But I thought I'd talk about them in this order. And they, like I said, they were very closely related. Recently, I guess Wednesday the 3rd, a couple weeks ago, we received bids for the Ludlowville Bridge project. The bids were in excess of available funding. This resolution, and I'll get into the details of the bid results and that next, but this resolution is to enable to make the project move forward at this time. The needed amount is $200,000 that we are planning to reserve by this resolution. Moving right over to the bid resolution of low bidder. We had 5 bids. And this is adjustment. Okay, I got my stuff out of order here. Here we go.
This is resolution B.
Yeah, resolution B. We had 5 bids. We had a very grouping of 2 bidders at the lower end. Those 2 bidders were about $17,000 apart. The bid itself was 90,000 over budget. We also have the need for construction inspection and construction support from our consultant, which adds another approximately 100,000. That's the need for the $200,000 transfer. The bids, like I said, coming in, if you look at, below line 23 on the memorandum discussing award of low bidder, you can see in the first row is engineer's estimate. And then what we had on the STIP budget, the low bidder of $1,246,487 is Silverline Construction. They've done a lot of work in the area. They are just completing the George Road Bridge in Dryden at this time. It's open for traffic. There might only be a few punch list items there. I'm also happy to report that talking to the contractor, and Mike, you've been pretty tuned into this whole issue, is that they are planning to start immediately and complete the bridge this year, which was our hopes in talking with New York State DOT and their project on the 34. Yes. Which only makes the momentum, I think, more important to try and move forward and award it at this time. They're doing everything they can. They've completely planned on, they've laid a schedule out to complete it this year. That will enable the state to tear out the, is it 34 or 34B bridge that's right near Lansing School. If their schedule, I talked about this a little bit at last month's meeting, their schedule, they have scheduled bidding and award in the fall, tearing it out this winter. So if our bridge is completed, the official state detour will not be using these local couple of area detours, but we know all the locals will be utilizing that. The truck route will be going around this area, but they will see some impact. So it'd be great having our bridge completed before they tear their bridge out. Those are, we've been trying to, through the course of these two bridges, we've been trying to do this. It is difficult, different sources of funding, different agencies, but it seems to be it's falling into place. Along with this resolution that I'd like you to consider, I also have a third resolution whereby we are looking to execute a contract with Fisher and Associates. They were the design consultant on this bridge. They've submitted a comprehensive package for those services to provide construction inspection and construction support for this project. I guess at this time, there might be a lot of questions. It's a lot of information. There's 3 resolutions. They all kind of go together. We like to break them up and be able to tell the whole story. I guess if you have any questions, I'd be.
All right, let's take questions on the Ludlowville Bridge and these resolutions, and then we'll move the resolutions. Are there questions? It's been a great explanation there, Jeff. I'm not seeing questions. So can I get someone to move the revised version of Resolution A, approve budget adjustment to transfer from highway fund balance and amend the capital program? That's ID 3756 point. Oh, that's PIN. I'm sorry. The ID is 9396.
I'll move that.
I see Glenn's hand first. Who was the second? And Dave, I seconded it, I think. Discussion on this transfer. I guess the only question I have is, are the engineers saying why, in what areas the additional funding is required? I mean, why did the bids come in so much higher than they had predicted?
I think the explanation there, we really didn't know. And I guess this is kind of my go-to, is that we never really know what the cost is. Every time, from the very beginning, from the very onset of the thought that we want to do a project, it's only estimate. It isn't until you actually bid something that you know what it's going to cost. So that's in a way, the reasoning for it, that there's always that unknown. There's always a variation. I think that also is that this project was supposed to be bid, I think, spring of last year. The federal aid process, working with DOT, sometimes it doesn't just go to Syracuse. It has to get an approval from Albany. There's a lot of environmental concerns. This bridge particular was bounced around in the hydraulic and the flooding thing. Some of the things that the engineer had found, the state was questioning, then they had to go back and forth. That delayed a lot. On the right-of-way side of things, that took a long time. It was a lot of process. There's some difficult driveways right in the vicinity on the quadrants of the bridge, but it's a tight spot, and those people had to have concerns answered, and they worked closely with all those residents. I think all those together, I don't think, even though it's higher, I don't think it's greatly higher. I think it's within reason. Also, we didn't know with the current situation and the COVID-19 and everything, how people and contractors are doing it, how busy they are. I think there's a lot of unknowns when you go to bid, and that's why it's such a big hurdle to get over. And I think we're all those factors together is probably combining to the increase in cost.
Thank you. Anything else? Ready to vote? Let's have a roll call. Ann Corman?
Yes.
Dave McKenna?
Yes.
Glenn Morey?
Yes.
Dan Klein?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That's unanimous. Let's go to resolution B, award of bid, Ludloville Road, bridge replacement, town of Lansing, ID 9397. Someone
move
move that? Dave moves it. Who's the seconded it? Glenn seconded. Discussion on this one. Or to the award to Silverline. Let's vote. Ann,
Yes.
Dave,
yes,
Glenn,
yes,
Dan,
Yes,
and I vote yes. And then D is authorization to execute contract with Fisher Associates for the construction phase services for the bridge replacement. That's 9399. Who's gonna move that? Dave again, and again seconded by Glenn. Discussion on that one. All right, here we go again. Ann?
Yeah, I had a question. I had my hand up.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
No worries. So just overall, I guess I was thinking that, Jeff, are you finding anything as far as COVID? Have any contractors stated that any of the increases because of any new precautions they need to take?
I haven't heard any conversation specifically regarding COVID and the bidding or from the contractor. I don't know the effect, if it affected it at all. Like I said, this contractor specifically is completing a project in the county on George Road Bridge in Dryden. That project went along through, back when a lot of things were unknown. There was even possibility of them needing to shut down. And then that was like a carve out from the governor to allow that work to continue. I don't know that it's affected them. I'm sure that there's things that are there that I just am not aware of, where they had to change, the way that they did things.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else before we vote? Let's vote. Ann? Ann?
I vote yes.
Okay, then Dave,
yes,
Glenn,
yes,
Dan?
yes.
I vote yes. That's unanimous. Okay, that's Ludloville. So where do you want to go next? Do you want to go to the resolution?
We'll go to the other resolution. It would be great. This is a Etna Lane Bridge over Fall Creek, town of Dryden. This is has to do with moving money, somewhat of a shell game, if you will, of some unseen right-of-way costs, right-of-way acquisition, right-of-way costs for a certain phase in this bridge that was kind of an unseen thing going in. We went to the ITCTC. They were able to locate some additional funding. As you know, we need to upfront that funding before it gets reimbursed. In the end, it's a pretty minimal addition to local cost, but it is a necessary thing in order to complete the agreement process with DOT and then get this phase completed in this at this time. Again, just to reiterate it, it's $26,840. I thought there was a local cost. I think the local cost is $1,000. I think it's in this memo at some point. I don't see it right now. Must have been on a different piece of paper.
1,342.
You see it. Okay, thank you.
Line 26 on the memo.
Yep, great. Yeah.
Let's get it on the table, and then if there's other questions. Who wants to move it? Dave? Is there a second? Seconded by Ann. All right, now discussion. Jeff, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna thank Dan for finding the line that it was on.
Our eagle eye. Anyone else have any questions on this one? All right, let's vote. Ann?
Yes.
Dave?
yes,
Glenn?
yes,
Dan?
Yes,
I vote yes. That's unanimous. Okay, thanks for that, Jeff.
Thank you.
we wanted to have a little discussion about this idea of having a presentation about our bridge and highway program for the legislature. As I mentioned earlier, that I raised the issue of getting some time on the agenda. I would expect 10, 15 minutes on an agenda, usually what we have for these. And Jeff, I wondered what you were thinking about it.
As we talked about last week, I think that's a great idea. You do keep saying bridge and road. I can certainly talk about bridges, but I thought the focus and what I submitted today was more of our local plan and what paving work that we're going to work to finish this year based on the present information. That's what I've submitted this year. And I thought that's what you were more talking about last month. I can talk
Probably
about
is.
Okay.
But I would assume the legislature would be interested to know the condition of our existing bridges. Do we have any flags, for example? And if we have any planned repairs on some of them, that might go in it a little bit too.
Yeah, I can certainly talk about kind of our present plan, an update on like what the things that we just talked about, a little shorter maybe about, that Ludloville project has been awarded and is progressing. Etna Road and Central Chapel are in design and right-of-way phases, and kind of give a snapshot of what's going on the bridge end of things too. That's more of a capital thing, but I can certainly add to that conversation. Not the full quarterly report like you're used to, but kind of a condensed version of currently where we're at with bridges specifically. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. And then I can, when you'd like me to, I can go through our summer plans as well.
I think that would be great. And also maybe explain how the budget issues are affecting that at this point. What you had planned and what you may be able to do. Okay.
Just to kind of step back a little bit, the story will make a lot more sense if I go back to the beginning. I'll try and be quick. But at the onset of COVID, administration and highway had a discussion, and we were asked to come up with two plans. One plan was a very minimal plan, is what I named it, and that minimal plan was really geared at the minimal amount of staff in order to maintain, public safety, and that was having to do with mowing, filling potholes, picking up dead deer. In the event there was some small ditching or drainage needed, that would be able to be accomplished. There was discussion about a few roads that we had completed last year or very close to be completed with only a little bit of work, and maybe they would be able to pave those roads. But in essence, it was the plan that we ended up going with, but it was a minimal plan. It included no chip seal, no paving. Clearly in our minds, we were going to work as much as we could to get roads ready for paving, because there was a lot unknown. CHIPS was unknown. Our state funding CHIPS was unknown. But based on the unknowns, and we still were going to kind of keep looking down the road and getting roads ready to pave. And in worst case scenario, funding would be released in 2021, and we would have roads ready to pave, and we would make a big push in 2021 and work to catch up 2020. So the two plans, stepping back again, we went with the minimal plan, but the next plan was a minimal paving plan. And we had originally planned this year to do about 25 miles of paving and 30 miles of chip seal. The minimal paving plan was less furloughed staff, about half. We ended up furloughing 12. This one was furloughing 7. Minimal paving plan. We were going to pave about 15 miles of road and do about the same number of miles of chip seal. Like I said, we ended up going with the minimal plan. As time went on, and I think people got more aware of that, there was some concern about us not paving. We've had those conversations. So working with administration again, we've looked at and kind of targeted and tried to look at roads that we didn't have to do a lot of work to, or we've already got done work was completed last year, or we have only a little bit more work to do. Those roads are at this time, and I sent an email out to everyone so you're aware of this change in plans. And we're working on doing a mill and fill on Trip Hammer, a mill and fill on a section of Warren. We've paved Podunk Road. We've chip sealed about 17 miles of road that was just completed. If you look at this plan that I've submitted to committee to review and me to talk about, those are all listed on here, as well as some of the estimating and cost. We're looking at, our budget. We were going to run out of money very early. At the time that I drafted this, the news coming from the state is that CHIPS has now been approved. All the information regarding that is that we are still subject to a 20% cut in all three of the programs, but at this time, all three of the programs are funded at last year's levels. So what that's saying to, I think, everyone across the state is that you're okay to spend 80% of what we received last year. With that said, and based on our levels of staffing, we're not going to run out of money. We're going to run out of time. So if you look at this sheet in front of us, the three highlighted are kind of the three categories. The top one, the work presently under progress, is what I discussed with Podunk Road. West Road in Groton is also the road I keep referring to that only need a little bit of work before we could pave it, and Trip Hammer Road and Warren Road. We kind of broke it down with the furlough and some assumptions, but with this present level of staffing, and I did that second category and the present level of funding without knowing the CHIPS was coming. We were going to be working on our pieces of roads, and these were roads that we felt like we could get done with the level of staffing that we did, weather permitting, and all things considered. We were looking at Salt Road. That's the 2 miles north of the state road that we haven't done any work to. Halseyville Road, and then work done that we were going to get ready for paving, being reliant on CHIPS. Those two roads, Salt Road and Halseyville Road, was going to burn our available funding without knowing about CHIPS. At that point, CHIPS is going to need to be kicking in. We've had now I can report we now have good news on CHIPS that we can spend up to 80%. So this is going to go all the way into August 1st. So we should be able to maybe not have them completed or as paved done, but be working for and completed this year, Salt Road, Halseyville Road, and now with the recent information about funding Pleasant Valley Road and Waterberg Road. I can tell you, we can go for a ride in all these roads. It's dire need to get some work done to them this year. So I really appreciate administration and us talking together and really kind of figuring out what we can do and spend. I can tell you that our workforce is stretched, and it's a big challenge to get those roads completed. At the same time, we don't want to fall behind on our mowing of roads, trimming brush around signs, picking up deer, things like that. So we're kind of bouncing day to day, but that's talking with our staff here. That's really what we're looking at. What we're reporting is what we're trying to get done. The assumptions starting August 1st is that CHIPS is going to be reallocated. We now know that we can spend up to 80%. So number one is checked, and that we have all our full force of employees return as planned, and the furlough is ended. So everyone comes back to work. The roads at that time, it's really unknown, but we're going to work to get them done and ready for paving. This paving will be done later in the year. So it's also a little bit weather permitting if we have a nice fall. But the next roads we're looking at doing at that time are Coddington Road, Schaefer Road, Cobb Street Road in Groton, and Connecticut Hill Road. That's kind of what our goals are. If we get further, there's a lot of work to do out there. There's a section on the hill of Pine Tree Road that we wanted to get paved. I could go down the list: Jersey Hill, Lounsbury, Burns Road. What I want everybody to know is that the roads you see listed on this page will be on the list next year. And I've been saying that for years, is that we kind of put out a wish list. We don't know a lot of the costs. It's kind of an estimate. And then as we dial in throughout the summer and we look at our funding and we go road at a road and we make the fix on the road that needs to be done. And then we go to the next road. And so it does run out of available funding and time a lot of times in the fall. So But what I've always said when I do the paving plans from year to year is that if we don't get to a road, once it makes that list, we don't drop it off. It stays on that list until we work through to get it done. Again, the big news is that the CHIPS is reallocated at what we can responsibly believe to be 80%. That is a day-to-day thing. I don't believe that we're going to be able to spend all of that 80% at this time of the year, getting the late start that we did, but we're going to do our best. And you know, our workforce comes back August 1st, and that'll give us the additional 12 employees to be able to really get some progress done on the roads. And what we don't get paved next year, we have some roads ready to go next year. We come out, you know, charging hard in the spring, and have our vendors come in and do some paving early on, and we'll keep doing what we do. That's pretty much the report. Thank you.
Questions? Dan Clark.
Which section of Connington Road? I see Connington Road on the list.
Connington Road, we are going to start at the county line and go north. Our thoughts on with that road is that we started there. That's where we were working when COVID hit. We were cutting canopy and looking at ditches and what culverts we need to replace and whatnot. But if you go way out to the end, you can see there's a lot of sunlight coming in out there. That canopy adds to pavement life and road life and bears roads off in the winter when the sun is low in the sky. There's a lot of good reasons for it. That's generally what we do first when we first show up on the road. So that's where we were at. We pulled everybody off there, but we did get some done. The plan there is to, again, it's a balance of ability and it's a balance of available funding. But our plan is we want to do 4 miles, but the plan is to at least break it up into 2 miles and start at the county line and come 2 miles kind of northwest.
Thank you.
Eventually the road has to come all the way into, you know, Ithaca and meet up with 96, but we're starting out there. It's badly wheel rutted. Plowing in the wintertime is very difficult. You can't clean those ruts out that are holding the snow. Our plow blade goes right over it, creates some dangerous situations and some slushy things. And it's one of those furthest from our facility points that we need to spend a lot of attention on, and had a lot of conversations with the residents in that area, and they're really looking forward to having us do something on the road.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Ann Corman.
Hey, thank you. And I know I probably should know this, but as far as like the CHIPS funding, is that more for materials and not reimbursing staff? Because I'm just saying that the staff, most of this, or a portion of the staff isn't going to be back until August 1st.
Yeah, CHIPS is whatever you want it to be. You can put a package together and reimburse for staff. You can put a package together and reimburse for just asphalt. CHIPS is a line item on the revenue side of our budget. So it's really spread throughout our budget. There's no one thing that it pays for. But you can, if you need to, get into identifying all of your costs on a project. It creates a lot of paperwork and reporting, but you can do that. You can pay for employees with CHIPS. Generally, you try and focus on your larger numbers, your larger invoices, if you will, to vendors to make sure that you secure all that revenue. Any locally spent project you can use for CHIPS. So there's a lot of ways to look at it, but the way it's done for 2020 is it's on the revenue side, but the number that we're getting in CHIPS isn't necessarily a line item anywhere in our budget. It's spread throughout our whole budget.
But it's not enough to be able for us to be able to afford to bring employees back, because you said the money won't be, the 80% that we're getting won't be able to be used for this year. We won't be able to use it all up, but yet we're not bringing employees back sooner. I guess I'm not understanding why we're not.
The furlough was until July 31st. That was a countywide decision. That's, you know, that's just kind of.
Jason has joined us. Jason, do you want to weigh in on that at all, or?
Sure.
So I think several things, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, CHIPS funding, as you mentioned, can be used for your own staff. It can be used for materials. It can be used for contract work. And not using it this year doesn't mean it goes away. It's rolled into next year. So we don't lose the funding from the state funding. So continuing with furloughs, to the end of July, this is a plan that Jeff's put forward, is how do we, pick up the work that we can pick up for the remainder part of the year. We talked earlier and gave the go-ahead on doing some work preemptively and working with some contractors to do the work that they can get done ahead of time. So I think, the CHIPS funding itself, my suggestion would be use it towards work in the future rather than trying to bring folks back early to supplement that. That wouldn't be my suggestion. I would put it towards, brick and mortar more than bringing folks back early. That'd be my suggestion.
Thank you. Ann, your hand still up, or do you have? Okay. Any other questions for Jeff? Jeff, I would just wondered if for the eventual presentation to the full legislature, if you could have a couple of slides with maps showing where the work you're talking about is going to happen. Not all the legislators know where all the town roads are in their districts, or in other people's districts, I should say.
Yeah, I'll take a page out of Joe Mariana's book and have a PowerPoint.
Well, please, nothing as extensive as Joe's, but 2 or 3 slides would be a help.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely have some mapping. It does show location, and that means a lot when you're looking at the countywide network.
Anything else, folks? Jeff, thank you very much for your information reports today.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We hadn't heard from Arel Lamaro in a couple of months, and we know he's been active with issues having to do with the COVID crisis and everything else. So we invited, at Ann's suggestion, thank you, Ann, for the suggestion, if Arel could come in today and talk to us. And Arel, welcome, and we'd be glad to hear from you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So yeah, I can give you an update. Our operations have been moving forward since as normal for the most part since the start of the COVID. With reduced staff, we have 5 staff on furlough, 4 cleaners and 1 maintenance worker. They're all full-time furloughs. And our hopes is that come July 31st, we'll be able to bring them back, or sooner if we're bringing more people back into our county facilities. 2 people, myself and our administrative assistant, were working remotely initially, and then as of June 1st, working 5 days out of the week in the office, and the two days remotely. We stagger our days so we're not in the office except for 1 day the week together. As far as operations, the focus has been, as you know, to keep the facilities clean and sanitized with our cleaners. So even though we have 4 cleaners furloughed, we've been able to redistribute our cleaning staff between day and night shifts to the buildings that have the higher occupancies or are open, for the most part, partially to the public. So that hasn't been a strain as of yet, but as we're doing the reopenings and more people are coming back to the buildings, we're looking at that and seeing if we need to consider bringing back some of the furloughed employees sooner. Capital projects have been moving forward. We were lucky that we bid a lot of our projects late last year, and we're pushing for early starts in 2020. And so we had 2 projects that started prior to the COVID pandemic, which was the flooring replacement project at the Human Services Building and at the Mental Health Building. And we also started a fire alarm upgrade for the old courthouse, old courthouse, main courthouse, and the Mental Health Building. So the flooring project, we've already completed the carpeting at the Mental Health Building, and the Human Services Building should be substantially complete this Saturday. The fire alarm, we've completed the upgrade and replacement of the fire alarm system at the old courthouse and at the main courthouse, and they should be completing the mental health building in about 2 to 3 weeks. The only thing that will be remaining in those buildings after that is patching and painting, where they've removed the old systems or devices. Projects that we started after the start of the COVID pandemic are the paving projects at the Emergency Response Center and at the Health Department. The Emergency Response Center is nearing completion. They should be done with the top course, I think early next week. They've got just a small portion left on the main lot, and then also we're widening the drive up to the garage near the building. The Health Department, they've removed almost all of the existing paving, put in under drains, and they're starting to put the subbase. And based on weather for next week, the plan is that they will start paving at the Health Department next week. I was fortunate to negotiate with our neighbor tenant, Claritas, to use their parking lot since most of their employees are not back to work. And so we've been able to secure about 72 parking spaces just adjacent to the Health Department, which is good because they're also an essential department, and so they've had staffing all along as well. So that worked out really well, and we appreciate the tenant doing that at no cost. We were willing to pay for it, like we did when we did the downtown parking project. We paid for spaces in the garage. So anyway, that was good. And then the last project that started about a month ago was roofing at the Public Works facility, a portion of the maintenance bays, the wash bay, and the roof above, well, like Aaron's area, where Aaron weights and measures and soil and water. That second floor roof is being replaced. And so we're hoping it's probably another 3 weeks left on that for the capital projects. We've also been doing a lot of the PlexiGuard barriers, sneeze guards. Most every department and building has those, and if you've gone around to some of the buildings, you'll see them. Our carpenter and maintenance supervisor came up with kind of the design. They're using PVC pipe and plexiglass and zip ties, and it's very light and it's very portable. They've also done more permanent ones at DMV and at the library and at Public Safety Building. But we've been fortunate that our administrative assistant, her husband, works for Inlet Glass and Mirror, and plexiglass is hard to come by these days. And so he's always made sure that we've had plenty to do what we've had to do for our buildings. Otherwise, it would be very tough and we'd be paying a lot for plexiglass. So that was fortunate. I mean, operations wise, I've got to commend my staff. They preferred coming into work than being furloughed, and they've been keeping busy. It's been nice to be able to do a lot of projects indoors when there are very few people in their buildings. So we've done a lot of painting, a lot of improvements that otherwise would have been more difficult to do, or we would have to do on overtime. But we're glad that things are starting to reopen slowly, and we have been doing well. So I appreciate the opportunity to give you an update on this. As I said before, as more people come into the buildings, I may need to discuss with Jason to see if we can bring back some of our staff prior to July 31st. But for this point, I think we're managing pretty well.
Thanks, Earl. You folks have certainly been busy. Questions? Yes. That was a meaty report. Ann Cornwell.
Arel, thanks for the report. I see you've been able to get a haircut.
Yeah, that was the first thing that I was looking forward to. So about 2 weeks ago, but yeah, before that, if you see me, yeah, there was a lot of hair there.
So it seems like it would have been good for all of us to have gotten stock a few months ago in plexiglass and Zoom. Yeah. So maybe next pandemic we'll be more prepared. So a serious question I had, I know for some of the municipalities in my district, they've been doing like half doors. I guess they call them the Dutch doors, or, making a barrier so people can't get in an actual room. Are you guys doing any of those?
Not in, well, we're doing them in like office suites, like actually third floor administration at the old jail. We have a Dutch door before you can go through the double doors off the elevator and walk right into any of the offices. So we do have a kind of a Dutch door barrier, so it kind of stops you. And that way, you know, the Autumn or whoever's in that department can ask people the questions that we're supposed to be asking. Or we may be doing something like that at HR as well. But beyond that, we've not done anything like that, or there have been no requests for anything like that. It's mostly just these plexiguard barriers.
And have you had any issues getting sanitation supplies? And I guess it's a two-parter. Do you anticipate, maybe it's too early yet, but maybe do you anticipate any difficulties with staffing since places are going to have to be cleaned in a, maybe, I don't know, a different way or maybe a more frequent way?
On the supply side, we haven't. We're not ordering additional like sanitizing, you know, wipes and such for departments. Some of them approach us for that. I know that some departments may have more difficulty in getting that, but we have not. We ordered a lot early. So we have enough for our operations currently. As far as staffing, that's what I said, you know, as we open up more buildings and bring back more people, then we may have to bring back some of those cleaners, I would think, earlier. But at this point, we seem to be doing well.
Do you have a new protocol that you've established for sanitizing?
We're just doing it more frequently and doing all, you know, surfaces that would be touched by you know, occupants in the public. So it's increased frequency. So that takes time away from other things. So that's the priority, is making sure they're sanitizing, you know, horizontal surfaces, touch surfaces, several times a day, which in the past, you know, they would probably just do it once. So it's more frequency. We do have a misting sanitizing device. So for large areas, let's say courtrooms and such, that it's a sanitizing mist that can be applied very quickly, so you don't have to wipe those surfaces down. So we have one unit that we got maybe a month and a half ago, and we ordered another one as well.
Is that used when people are not there or when they are there? The misting thing?
It's used when people are not there.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Arel, you rattled off that nice list of capital projects. Is there somewhere that's in writing? Perhaps it could be sent to me electronically or to the committee. And if there isn't, I don't want to give you a lot of work. I just thought if there's something on the capital projects.
I did one either early this year about those 4 projects. We just listed the projects that we were intending to do this year. What I shared with you is more current as far as, you know, kind of progress of those. So I can do either send the projects that we had planned to do this year.
That would be fine. As I said, I don't want to give you a lot of work to do here. Other questions? Arel, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Good to see you all. Hopefully soon we'll be able to get together.
Let's go to Mike Hall, Airport. Now, I did want to mention that Lisa Holmes is on our call today too.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Mike. Welcome.
Quick list and then a couple resolutions. First of all, in terms of today's status at the airport, general aviation is pretty much back. In fact, is surging because there are people who have access to general aviation that prefer not to fly with the general public. So that sector is looking good right now. The airlines, yeah, the nadir was 6% load factor in April. It was 15 in May. We're thinking probably 30 in June. And the flight schedule starts to really restore in July and August. Now, how many people are going to be flying remains to be seen, but we're, you know, on a fairly strong path back to the new normal, whatever that turns out to be. One thing that's evolving is masking and flying. After considerable debate, the Airline Association has come together and said that you'll be masked throughout flight except when you're drinking or eating. And that if you choose not to mask, you'll be barred by the carrier from future bookings. So they're taking enforcement in their hands, and each of the airlines, it was important that they get a coordinated position, because otherwise, it would become a competitive advantage for one airline versus another. We think that's a good position to have, because this virus spreads primarily in groups and small spaces, and that pretty well defines airplanes. And the flip side of it is that the airlines are extensively decontaminating the aircraft. So that means that your real risk on the airplane is someone breathing the virus in your vicinity. So that's all coming together. In terms of outbound traffic, we've got a very clean environment. We've got the airlines, taking you into the system, TSA screening you without touching your documentation at this point. And then you're in the system and you're going someplace. If you're concerned about where you're going, we've got all the links on flyithica.com that will give you the current medical status around the country, or the world for that matter. And then as far as inbound is concerned, we're receiving people that have been screened into a federal transportation system. But I think, as I've mentioned to you, a couple of you, if you were flying to Des Moines and you got off the airplane, you wouldn't necessarily know where to get medical assistance if you felt like you needed it, like, wow, I'm getting sick. So we've got signage now with the status of New York and 24-hour number at Hugo Medical Center, so that if you're not feeling well, you don't have to go to the hotel and wish you had medical treatment. You'll be able to reach somebody 24 hours a day. As far as the airport itself is concerned, the last jet bridge, which is the end of the project, is being installed later this month. We got a few cleanup things in customs in the terminal. The landscaping's taking place this week. We're missing a bag screening device for customs, but everything else is moving along pretty well. It's like herding cats, but we should be ready to open in the third quarter. My sense is that the federal fiscal year starts the 1st of November or 1st of October, and probably on the customs end of thing, that's a realistic opening date, just because it's the federal government and they do things by federal fiscal year. So look for customs over the course of the summer, and we'll let you know as the projections start to solidify a little bit more. We're in the project closure phase, and the resolutions this morning reflect that. There's very little left of the big project to get straightened out. This morning, there's a supplemental agreement for changes that took place during the project that required CNS to do work beyond their contract scope. That, in a nutshell, that's changes that came from Albany and came from the federal government, both of whom had interests in the project. So those are the supplemental agreements, including wrapping up one of the jet bridges with an audit to make sure that all the expenses were proper. Subject to your questions, we can work the resolutions.
Questions? Dan Klein.
Hi, Mike. I've had a number of inquiries lately from constituents about the funding of the whole airport project. And I believe it's coming out of the political campaign that's going on right now. There's a lot of debate in there. I think that's why I'm getting these questions. And I found that I was not able to answer them as precisely as I would like. And so I'm seeking some clarification. And it has to do with how much funding for the entire renovation project is still outstanding and how that's supposed to be being paid for. So let me start with that.
So the numbers are roughly 14 million from the state, 10 million from the feds, and a bond that I have said will not exceed 10 million in terms of local funding. Then we received almost 1.8 million in CARES money to apply to the project. And we're waiting still for New York State Electric and Gas on the no pipe alternative to see what they're going to contribute. But the bottom line is that we're going to bond less than $10 million, 10 million or less. And the original project cost 5 years ago to do just the security upgrade was 8 million with no external funding coming. Obviously, the ability to address the bond totally within the airport depends on lots of things. There are unknowns out there, but that's the upper limit of what could be considered local funding, and part or all of that local funding will be paid for by passenger facility charges from the airport, plus any additional monies we may get, as part of the federal response come 30 September. The precipitous date out there, which is when CARES runs out, is 30 September. It's also the start of the next federal fiscal year. And, at that point, airline service is free market. We're doing everything we can to encourage our carriers to keep a strong presence or grow it in Ithaca, because we do expect that Cornell University will have some significant in-residence component. We know that Ithaca College is already planning that. And so I think we've got a fast rebounding market here in Ithaca compared to many other communities. And that relates to passenger facility charges. So there are a lot of moving parts out there, but the local portion of the airport will be 10 or less. Does that help you with the discussion?
It helps a lot. I think just one more follow-up question. What the PFCs? How much were we receiving? Before the pandemic, roughly. What's the annual take that Ithaca gets on that?
Yeah, I've had too many numbers running around in my mind here of late, but something in the order of $400,000, 100,000 passengers times roughly $4 a passenger. There's still a movement out there, which I think is gaining strength because of the whole situation, if you will, that we face trying to come out of a depression or a recession. And that would be to move the PFCs to $8 a person. So we also were up 20% in January and February. So absent the pandemic, we would be at 1.2 times $4, or if the PFCs are changed, 1.2 times $8. We think that the reasonable carrying capacity of the airport, when you consider market and the new facility and everything, is around 150,000, and which would be growth from the historic high, which was 120 back in 2010, before the accident in Buffalo changed the industry and seat availability and what have you. So at a high end, I would say we could be at 1.2 million in PFCs a year. At a low end, something around the $400,000 mark. So to be continued, and I will be sure to keep you fully informed about that. I don't think that the airlines oppose PFCs, but frankly, $8 a ticket to pay for what you've got in our terminal, and that's the intent of the program, is to fund infrastructure like that, is not a particularly grievous charge, I guess, is what I'm saying. You'll spend that to get a cup of coffee and a donut, right? So.
Thank you.
So I think it'll happen. I hope that clarifies it.
It does. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Mike, I had a couple. I just read this week that the airlines are banning alcohol on the airplanes. And I
Well-
wondered, is that going to affect our service at the airport?
Well, people might be drinking more before they get on. But the issue with alcohol is, I think, was part of the broader context of, are people going to be masked? And are we going to let them take masks off? And the industry is still working through this. And the fact is, you know, they're selling drinks, except in first class where they've already sold it to you when you buy the ticket. And it's a revenue stream for them. So I would be surprised if that becomes any kind of a long-term issue. I think they're going to want to sell the drinks. And I think what they're going to do is allow you, particularly if this thing sort of continues to fade over time, they're going to allow you to unmask to eat and drink, is what it boils down to. So I don't think that's going to be a permanent change. So.
And I'll get you a second, Ann, but I wanted to ask one other question, and this is for you and Jason. After our last meeting, with respect to the CARES grant, I know, Mike, you would like to see that used toward debt service. Jason was telling us that he wanted to hold off a little while to see what the operations issue might be for it. Wondered, you two are going to talk. Has that happened? Do we know any more about where we're going with that?
Well, it's an ongoing conversation, and if anybody could tell me where we're going to be next January, you know, I'd be happy to slip them some funds. I think that you know, there are gates or dates or milestones, however you want to look at it, that lead up to the actual issuance of the debt service for the airport, and we will know a great deal more before we get to the point of having to make that decision than we do today. Our goal at the airport is to remain a very viable and efficient business. We're working very hard at that. There are a number of things that we'll be proposing in the 2020 budget that will help us reduce operating costs and improve capacity at the airport. And so, you know, we'll see how all that plays out. But the first and best use of the CARES money is debt reduction. And the reason for that is several-fold, but one is it relates to the cost per enplanement for the airlines at the airport. And while the cost per enplanement is relatively insignificant compared to the cost of fuel and labor, although fuel is down for the airlines right now, the cost per enplanement at an airport is kind of like a pebble in their shoe. And so it always comes up when they're negotiating with us. And our cost for enplanement at Ithaca is above average. And so when I say I'd really like you to go to Charlotte every day, one of the things American says is, well, what can you do about the cost per enplanement? So the best investment of the CARES money is in debt reduction. Now, that said, it's important that the airport business continue to be able to operate as an independent business and not take general fund dollars as our neighboring airports do, like to the tune of $1 million plus at both Elmira and Binghamton. So we'll be working through all that, and you know, we'll make some good recommendations when we have to make the decision, but we don't have to make the decision today. So it becomes a goal rather than you know, something we have to decide in the near term.
Jason?
Yeah, I'll add that Mike and I, it's an ongoing conversation with the CARES Act funding and how we use that. And as far as clarity as to when a decision has to be made, you know, the actual bonding of that project doesn't necessarily have to be February of 21. It can be February of 22. I will say that I don't know that I fully agree that using the CARES Act for debt reduction is the best use. It depends on where we fare for this year, operation wise. So that's going to be part of, you know, something that we'll be keeping an eye on and monitoring as we go through it, where revenue falls. You know, the fund balance of the airport is not, you know, it could always be bigger and always be greater. And I think what we don't want to do is get into a situation where we're utilizing all that fund balance in the immediate term, not knowing how the air travel is going to recover. And Mike brings up a good point. If we knew what it was going to be like, by January, we'd have much easier decisions to be made. So I think it's just a fluid observation and discussion that we have going on as we figure out month to month how things change and how the economy recovers, how air travel recovers. And that will impact PFCs as well, to speak to that. The federal changes that PFCs would greatly help our circumstance to be able to generate more revenue to put towards an eventual bond for the project, which is important. So monitoring that, and if we see that come to fruition, that will help the discussion greatly, because we don't know how it's going to recover, and if it recovers quicker, that would be better. If it doesn't, then it's going to linger in terms of PFC recovery. So it's something we talk about regularly, and we'll continue to talk about it.
Okay, well, thank you both for having the conversation, and we look forward to having reports as you come to conclusion sometime in the future. Okay, let's go to Ann.
Thank you. So Mike, I had a question if you had any updates on carriers or routes as far as, what is going on right now or what might be going on in the future that you know?
Sure. I can tell you what's going on right now. Back in March, when the CARES Act was issued, it required airlines to maintain service to the stations that they served going into the pandemic. So United American and Delta were required to continue serving Ithaca. The president of United New York, they have sub-region presidents, Jill Kaplan, who many of you met, called me and said that with regret, they were going to ask DOT for relief from serving Ithaca for the period of April, May, June. DOT denied that request. So United's been here through the darkest days, April, May, June. They then refiled seeking to suspend service at Ithaca for July, August, and September. And of course, remember, 30 September is the big date, because after that, they no longer have to ask DOT. In spite of that, they kept their schedule loaded. And then Senator Schumer called the president of United, the big president, Kirby, and said that their service at Ithaca was very important to him. That was a very nice gesture on his part. We now see that they've suspended July, but they've got 4 flights a day starting in August. Whether any of this is well coordinated internally is a good question. So United is the big unknown at this point. Delta has been very deliberate. They're the best funded, they're the best run company. Their strategy has been to reduce at the margins. So for example, they have pulled permanently out of Scranton Wilkes-Barre. But in Ithaca, they are now providing service with Endeavor, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Delta's, and we're closer to the mothership and have no indication, though we wouldn't necessarily have, that they're going to do anything other than increase service at Ithaca over time. And I proposed to Delta that they take us to Kennedy. That resolves one of Cornell's travel issues, which is being able to connect the 2 campuses with air service, 3 campuses. American seems to be the most aggressive carrier right now. In many ways, they are in the weakest shape, but they are working hard to emerge from this as a dominant carrier in the national market. Now, for those of you that had experience in the past with United, you would have discovered that their great strength was international. as much trouble as we had getting to Newark with them. And once you got to Newark and got on the big jet and went to Shanghai, it was a really nice experience. International travel is going to come back more slowly than domestic travel. So I think what's happened is Americans saying, okay, let's see if we can't take a big chunk of the market that's going to come back first. So we are talking with American about our interests, and our interests are Washington. If United decides to not serve Washington for us, Charlotte, Chicago, and New York. And they have been willing to have those discussions with us. The first thing that came up was the cost per employment. Back to my comment earlier, the best and highest use of the CARES money, if we can afford to do it, meaning we don't need it for operations money, is to invest it in debt reduction, because that lowers the cost per employment for them. So that's a little bit of a longer answer than you may have expected, but a lot of moving parts out there. And if anything's going to change for us near term, it might be more service from American. They were the first carrier to add flights back in starting in July, and they're being quite aggressive. And I think they're basically rolling the dice to see if they can come out of this thing more competitive domestically.
Thanks for the update, Mike.
Okay, any other questions for Mike? Got some resolutions. Resolution A here under airport, authorizing supplemental agreement number 26 with C&S Companies for terminal building expansion, security improvements, phase 2, supplemental construction phase services, and number 27 for general aviation, U.S. Customs and Border Protection Facility, PEW, supplemental construction phase services at the Ithaca Tompkins Regional Airport, ID 9395. Someone want to move that?
I'll move it.
Dan, I got a seconded by Dave. Discussion about this one. Let's vote. Vote. Dave, are you trying to be recognized? Okay. Let's go to the vote. Ann?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
I vote yes. Resolution B, audit of final payment, EL Ames Inc., DBA RJ Ortlieb Construction Company for the passenger boarding bridge gate 3, Tompkins Regional Airport. That's ID 9392. Someone want to move that one?
I'll move it.
Glenn moves that, seconded by Dave. Discussion on the paying for the boarding bridge work. Let's vote. Ann? Oh, Ann, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I was just asking, so is this a brand new bridge?
This is the refurbished bridge. Ortlieb refurbished the existing bridge, and this is an audit to make sure that, we were properly charged. They did what they said they were going to do, and the charges were appropriate.
Okay.
The last new bridge comes in at the end of this week, replacing a loaner that's been in place since, last November.
Okay, great. Thank you. I vote yes, unless we're still discussing.
I think we'll continue with the roll call. Dave?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
I vote yes. Okay, anything else, Mike?
No, I think, it's it's an interesting ride right now, and most of the focus here is on trying to secure strong service coming out of this, because the health of our business depends as much on that as anything else going forward. We've got, things taken pretty well care of, in terms of the infrastructure here. Now it's making sure that we get carriers to take us where we need to go and do it safely and bring people safely into our community.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate the update. As far as anything on transportation, I just could mention that, as you remember, the town of Dryden had grants for 2 bridges. One was Freeze Road, and the other is the George Road Bridge. The George Road Bridge was not controversial. The George Road Bridge has actually been completed and opened a month ahead of schedule. So that road is kind of important because it crosses between Route 13 and Route 38. Some people use it to avoid the village, for example, the village of Dryden. But it's there. It's a nice modern bridge. And it's very close to the pedestrian crossing for the Dryden Freeville Rail Trail. If you haven't been across it. And the town of Dryden is again talking about trying to get the state to lower the speed limit on George Road. So I could tell you that no new update on the Freeze Road other than they seem to be wanting this one-lane bridge option. Can we take the minutes of May 21st? Ann is moving them. Is there seconded by Glenn? Any discussion on the minutes? Vote on those. Ann?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Anything else for the good of the cause this morning?
I want to know if Dave McKenna has a bird in his room.
Dave McKenna, do you have a bird in your room?
No, I'm on the porch, so there's birds outside.
Okay, very nice sound effect.
Okay. All right, then let's take a motion to adjourn. Dan and Glenn, all in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all, and I appreciate it this morning. We accomplished a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike and Katrina.
Take care, everybody.